The autumn sun cast long shadows through the grand windows of Hawthorne Hall as Alaric Hawthorne, the seventh Duke of Hawthorne, stood before the ornate fireplace, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. The flames danced, illuminating the stern lines of his countenance, a face that had never known true softness. At 33 years, he commanded respect with a mere glance, his grey eyes cold as winter frost. "The documents are prepared, Your Grace," announced Mr. Whitcomb, his solicitor, placing the parchments upon the mahogany desk with practiced precision. "The marriage contract awaits only your signature and that of the young lady." "And the arrangements?" The Duke's voice resonated through the cavernous study, deep, controlled, devoid of emotion. "All as you specified, Your Grace, discreet, expeditious, and binding. The ceremony shall take place on the morrow at first light. The Archbishop himself has been persuaded to officiate." Alaric nodded, satisfied with the efficiency of his commands. The estate required an heir, the bloodline demanded continuation, and Parliament would not cease their incessant prattling until he secured the succession. For a man who had built his existence upon duty and order, this marriage was merely another obligation to be fulfilled, another box to be marked upon life's austere ledger. "And the young lady, does she comprehend the nature of this arrangement?" he inquired, not from concern but from pragmatism. Hysterics would be most inconvenient at this juncture. "Miss Graceworth understands her position perfectly, Your Grace," replied Whitcomb, adjusting his spectacles. "She accepts the honor of your proposal with appropriate gratitude and humility." "Proposal," Alaric echoed, the word tasting foreign upon his tongue. There had been no bended knee, no poetic declarations, no courtship of spring walks and summer picnics. There had been only necessity and convenience, the cold currency of aristocratic survival. Outside the leaded windows, a carriage approached, its wheels crunching upon the gravel drive. The Duke straightened his already impeccable posture, adjusting the signet ring that had adorned the hands of Hawthorne men for generations. "She arrives," announced the butler from the doorway, his voice as measured as the ticking of the grandfather clock. "Very good, Hargrove. Show her in." The doors parted, and there she stood. Evelyn Graceworth, 24 years of age, a woman of no fortune but impeccable lineage. Her golden honey hair was secured beneath a modest bonnet, her blue eyes lowered in deference. She was slight of frame, her hands, ungloved, clasped before her, betraying a slight tremor. "Your Grace," she curtsied, her voice soft as distant church bells. "Miss Graceworth." He did not bow, merely inclined his head a fraction. "I trust your journey was agreeable." "Yes, Your Grace, most agreeable." Her response came without inflection, rehearsed and proper. The silence that followed pressed upon them like a physical weight. The solicitor cleared his throat. "Perhaps, Your Grace, the young lady might wish for refreshment after her travels." "Of course. Hargrove will show you to the drawing-room, Miss Graceworth. Tea shall be served forthwith. We shall discuss the particulars of tomorrow's ceremony once you have rested." She curtsied once more, those small hands still trembling. As she turned to follow the butler, Alaric caught a glimpse of her profile. Delicate, yet there was something in the set of her chin that suggested not weakness, but perhaps an unexpected reserve of fortitude. "One moment, Miss Graceworth." She paused, turning back to him with eyes that betrayed a flash of apprehension before returning to their customary modest gaze. "You understand what is expected of you, as Duchess of Hawthorne?" "I do, Your Grace," she replied, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "To bring honor to your name, to manage your household with efficiency and discretion, and to provide an heir to secure the lineage." He nodded, satisfied with her comprehension of her duties. "Very good. That will be all." As the door closed behind her, Whitcomb approached the desk, documents in hand. "She appears suitable, Your Grace, obedient, well-mannered, and of good breeding stock, if I may be so bold." "Bold indeed, Whitcomb," Alaric replied coldly, "but accurate nonetheless. She will serve her purpose." "There is the matter of Lord Severin Vale," the solicitor ventured cautiously. "He has been making inquiries about your hasty nuptials." The Duke's expression darkened. "My cousin should concern himself with his own affairs and not mine. He claims that he is next in line only until I produce an heir." Alaric cut him off sharply, which I intend to remedy with all haste. Later that evening, as Alaric stood by the window of his bedchamber, he observed his bride-to-be walking in the formal gardens below. The dying light caught her hair, turning it to burnished gold. She paused to touch a late-blooming rose, her fingers gentle upon its petals. For a fleeting moment something stirred within him, not desire, for that was a weakness he had long since mastered, but perhaps curiosity, those trembling hands that dared to touch the thorns. A fragile vessel for so great a burden, he murmured to himself, turning away from the window. But she need only be strong enough to bear a son. In the morning, he would place his mother's ring upon that trembling hand, and the house of Hawthorne would continue. That was all that mattered. That was all that could ever matter. Yet, as he removed his gloves that night, he found himself staring at his own hands. Strong, steady, certain. Hands that had never trembled, never hesitated, never known tenderness. And for the first time in years, he wondered if that was truly something to pride himself upon. The wedding ceremony had been precisely as Alaric had orchestrated. Brief, solemn, and devoid of superfluous sentiment. Evelyn had spoken her vows in a voice scarcely audible, her trembling hands clutching a small bouquet of white roses. No guests had been present save the requisite witnesses and the Archbishop, whose disapproving frown spoke volumes about the hasty nature of the proceedings. Now, a fortnight hence, the Duke and his new Duchess stood at the entrance of Lady Pembroke's grand ballroom, their arrival causing a ripple of hushed whispers to sweep through the assembled aristocracy. "The Duke of Hawthorne and her Grace, the Duchess," announced the footman, his voice carrying over the string quartet's delicate melody. Alaric felt Evelyn's arm tense beneath his touch as all eyes turned toward them. Her face remained composed, a portrait of serene dignity, yet he could sense her discomfort as palpably as the winter chill that swept through an improperly sealed window. "Courage, Duchess," he murmured, his lips barely moving. "They are merely curious. Give them nothing but your perfect posture and placid smile." "Yes, Your Grace," she whispered back, straightening her shoulders beneath the weight of her new title. They moved into the ballroom with measured steps, Alaric nodding curtly to acquaintances, while Evelyn maintained her gentle smile. The sea of faces parted before them, some openly curious, others veiled with practiced indifference that failed to conceal their avid interest. "Alaric, my dear fellow," a boisterous voice broke through the murmurs, and the Duke turned to see Lord Pembroke approaching, his ruddy face betraying the effects of too much brandy. "So the rumors are true. You've finally taken a bride, and such a lovely one at that." "Indeed, Pembroke," Alaric replied coolly. "Allow me to present Her Grace, the Duchess of Hawthorne." "Enchanted, my dear." Lord Pembroke bowed with exaggerated gallantry. "Though I must confess the suddenness of your nuptials has set every tongue in London wagging." "A most intriguing mystery, wouldn't you agree?" "I find nothing mysterious in fulfilling one's duty to one's lineage," Alaric responded, his tone brooking no further discussion on the matter. Lady Pembroke appeared at her husband's side, her eyes raking over Evelyn's form with the precision of a tailor assessing inferior cloth. "Your Grace," she curtsied to Alaric before turning to Evelyn, "and Duchess, what a modest gown you've chosen for your first appearance in society. How refreshingly economical." Evelyn's cheeks coloured slightly. "You are too kind, Lady Pembroke. I'm curious, from which finishing school did you graduate? I don't believe I've had the pleasure of making your acquaintance prior to your elevation." Before Evelyn could respond, a new voice interjected, rich, melodious and warm with genuine affection. "Alaric, at long last." A woman with auburn curls and intelligent green eyes approached, her smile bright as summer sunshine. "I returned from the continent only yesterday, and was devastated to learn I'd missed your wedding." Relief flashed briefly across the Duke's stern features. "Clara, I wondered when you might grace London with your presence once more." Lady Clara Lismere took both his hands in hers, a liberty no one else would dare, and squeezed them affectionately. "Did you think I would miss the entire season? Particularly when my dearest childhood friend has caused such a sensation?" She turned to Evelyn with a warm smile. "You must be the Duchess. I'm Clara Lismere, an old friend of your husband's. We practically grew up together at Hawthorne Hall when my father was the Duke's advisor. A pleasure, Lady Clara, Evelyn responded, her voice gaining a touch of genuine warmth for the first time that evening. Come, you must tell me everything, Clara insisted, linking her arm through Evelyn's. I want to hear how this confirmed bachelor finally succumbed to matrimony. Lady Pembroke, you won't mind if I steal the Duchess for a moment, will you? Such dear friends must catch up. Without waiting for a response, Clara guided Evelyn away, leaving Alaric to watch as his wife was escorted across the ballroom by the one person in London society he truly trusted. A most unexpected match, Lady Pembroke observed, her voice dripping with insinuation. One wonders what necessitated such haste. One should be careful what one wonders aloud, Lady Pembroke, Alaric replied, his voice dropping to a dangerous timbre. Speculation can be most hazardous to one's social standing. Across the room he observed Clara introducing Evelyn to several distinguished matrons. His new wife's posture remained tense, but Clara's infectious charm seemed to be creating a buffer against the most cutting scrutiny. Your Grace, a silken voice spoke from behind him. How delightful to see you in attendance tonight, and with your new bride. My felicitations. Alaric turned slowly, his face hardening as he met the amber gaze of Lord Severin Vale, his cousin, his rival, and the man who had coveted the Hawthorne title since boyhood. Severin, I wasn't aware you had been invited. Lady Pembroke and I share a passion for botanical specimens. Her conservatory is quite remarkable. Severin's smile never reached his eyes as he twisted an ornate signet ring upon his finger. But I must congratulate you on your marriage. So precipitous. One might almost suspect a pressing reason behind such urgency. One might, if one were given to idle gossip rather than productive endeavors, Alaric replied coldly. Severin chuckled, the sound like silk drawn over steel. Always so proper, cousin, so correct. One wonders if your new Duchess appreciates such rigid rectitude. She seems rather delicate, almost tremulous, wouldn't you say? Alaric's jaw tightened imperceptibly. My wife's demeanor is none of your concern. Of course not. Though her background might be of interest to certain circles, I've been making inquiries about the Graceworth family. Most illuminating research. Whatever game you're playing, Severin. No game, cousin. Merely academic curiosity. After all, the Hawthorne bloodline has remained unblemished for 7 generations. It would be a shame to see it diluted. Before Alaric could respond, the music changed to announce the commencement of dancing. Across the room he saw Evelyn standing alone, Clara having been claimed by a young earl for the first quadrille. Several gentlemen glanced in the new Duchess's direction, but made no move to request her hand, creating a bubble of isolation around her that grew more obvious by the moment. Excuse me, he said curtly to Severin, moving across the ballroom with purposeful strides. He reached Evelyn just as the whispers around her became audible. No one will ask her to dance. Can you imagine those trembling hands attempting a waltz? The Duke must have been desperate indeed. Alaric extended his gloved hand toward her, his voice clear enough to carry to those nearest. The first dance belongs to me, Duchess, if you would do me the honor. Surprise flickered across her features before she placed her ungloved hand in his. The honor is mine, your Grace. As he led her onto the floor, he felt her trembling intensify. I do not dance with any frequency, he admitted in a low voice. But I believe we must make a statement. Yes, your Grace, she whispered, her eyes fixed on the elaborate cravat at his throat. I shall endeavor not to embarrass you. The music began, and he guided her through the steps with military precision. Her movements were graceful despite her nervousness, her years of training evident in the perfect curve of her arms and the lightness of her steps. You dance well, he observed, surprising himself with the unsolicited praise. Thank you, your Grace. My mother insisted upon it. As they turned through the figure of the dance, Alaric caught sight of Severin watching them, his expression calculating. Clara, dancing nearby, smiled encouragingly at Evelyn. Your friend is very kind, Evelyn ventured softly. Clara? Yes. Perhaps the only truly sincere person in this nest of vipers. He hesitated, then added, she will be a valuable ally for you. When the dance concluded, Alaric escorted Evelyn to where Clara now stood. "I entrust the Duchess to your care for a moment, Clara. I must speak with Lord Ashworth on a matter of Parliament." Clara's green eyes sparkled with understanding. "We shall be perfectly content together, shan't we, Your Grace?" As he moved away, Alaric heard Clara say warmly to Evelyn, "Now you must call me Clara, not Lady Lismere." Any woman who has managed to capture Alaric's attention must possess extraordinary qualities indeed. He paused, glancing back to see Evelyn's lips curve in a hesitant smile, the first genuine expression he had witnessed upon her countenance. Something unnamed stirred within his chest at the sight, a sensation both foreign and disquieting. The evening progressed, and though the whispers continued, Alaric noted with satisfaction that Clara's endorsement had softened some of the most pointed scrutiny. However, as they prepared to depart, he observed a striking young woman with chestnut-red hair approach Evelyn, her posture radiating practiced elegance. "Duchess," she curtsied, her golden-brown eyes alight with barely concealed malice. "I am Margaret Vale. I believe you and I should become better acquainted, considering our familial connection." Alaric stepped forward immediately. "Miss Vale, I was unaware you had returned to London." "My brother insisted," she replied, her gaze never leaving Evelyn's face. "He thought it imperative that I make the acquaintance of my new cousin by marriage." "Another time, perhaps," Alaric intervened smoothly. "The Duchess and I are just departing." As they entered their carriage, Evelyn's hands twisted in her lap. "She is Lord Severin's sister." "Yes, and equally dangerous, though perhaps less obvious in her methods." He studied her profile in the dim light. "Oh, you conducted yourself well this evening." "Thank you, Your Grace." Her voice was soft, weary with the strain of the evening's performance. In the silence that followed, Alaric found himself wondering what thoughts moved behind those blue eyes, what dreams or fears occupied the mind of the woman who now bore his name, yet remained a stranger. The carriage rolled onward through London's lamplit streets, bearing them back to Hawthorne House and the separate bedchambers that awaited them there. The morning ritual of tea service in the Duchess's private sitting room had become a carefully choreographed dance of propriety. Alaric stood by the window, observing as Evelyn's trembling hands arranged the silver service with meticulous attention. 3 weeks had passed since their wedding, and still these daily encounters maintained the stilted formality of strangers forced into proximity. "Will you take lemon today, Your Grace?" she inquired, her voice soft against the ticking of the mantel clock. "Yes, and perhaps you might call me Alaric when we're alone," he responded, surprising himself with the suggestion. "The constant formality seems unnecessary in private." Her hands stilled momentarily. "As you wish, Alaric." His name on her lips sounded foreign, almost vulnerable, like a key turning in a long-sealed door. He accepted the delicate porcelain cup, noting the slight tremor as their fingers nearly brushed. It was curious, he thought, how her hands perpetually betrayed her emotions, while her face remained a study in serene composure. "I have received correspondence from my steward at Hawthorne Hall," he said, sipping the perfectly brewed tea. "The spring planting progresses well, and the renovations to the east wing are nearing completion." "That is welcome news. Will we journey there soon?" Her question held a note of wistfulness that caught his attention. "You find London not to your liking?" Evelyn hesitated, then replied with careful honesty, "I find it overwhelming at times, Your Grace." "Alaric, the constant scrutiny, the social obligations, and the whispers," he finished for her. "Yes, London society can be merciless to newcomers, particularly those who arrive under unusual circumstances." "I do not regret our arrangement," she hastened to assure him, her eyes lifting briefly to meet his before returning to her teacup. "I merely thought the country might offer respite." Alaric considered her words, struck by the implicit admission of strain. He had chosen her precisely for her seeming placidity, her acceptance of duty without emotional complication. Yet he now glimpsed something more beneath that tranquil exterior, a sensitivity that perceived and absorbed the subtle cruelties of their social circle. "We shall depart for Hawthorne Hall within the fortnight," he decided. "There are matters requiring my attention there, and the spring countryside may prove beneficial for your constitution." Thank you. The simple gratitude in her voice stirred an uncomfortable sensation in his chest, something akin to guilt. Their quiet moment was interrupted by Hargrove's discreet knock. Lord Severin Vale requests an audience, Your Grace. Alaric's expression hardened instantly. Inform him I am not receiving visitors this morning. He was most insistent, Your Grace, and mentioned a matter of some urgency regarding family records. A cold foreboding settled over Alaric. Very well. Show him to my study. I shall join him presently. When the butler had departed, Alaric turned to find Evelyn watching him, her blue eyes shadowed with concern. My cousin's visits rarely bode well, he explained, setting down his cup with controlled precision. He has coveted the Hawthorne title since boyhood. He seems a man of significant ambition, she observed quietly. Ambition without principle is merely greed dressed in finer clothing. Alaric moved toward the door, then hesitated. It would be best if you avoided his company whenever possible. In the study, Severin stood examining the ancestral portraits lining the walls, his elegant figure a dark silhouette against the morning light. He turned as Alaric entered, a serpentine smile curving his lips. Cousin, how domestic you've become. Tea with your bride. How utterly charming. State your business, Severin. I have pressing matters requiring my attention. Severin ran his finger along the edge of the mahogany desk, a gesture both casual and proprietary. I've been researching genealogies. Fascinating pursuit, don't you think? The tangled branches of noble families, the occasional grafting of less noble stock. If you've come merely to speak in riddles, I suggest you find another audience. No riddles, Alaric, merely facts. Severin withdrew a folded document from his coat. Did you know that there is no record of a Graceworth family in Berk's peerage? Curious, considering your wife's supposed lineage. Alaric maintained his impassive expression. Not all respectable families appear in Berks. The Graceworths are of good standing, if modest means. Modest indeed. So modest that prior to 5 years ago, they appear not to have existed at all. Severin's amber eyes gleamed with malicious triumph. Your Duchess's background is as fabricated as a penny dreadful novel. I wonder what Parliament would make of that. With deliberate calm, Alaric moved to the brandy decanter, pouring 2 glasses. What exactly do you hope to accomplish with these insinuations? Insinuations? I have documentation, cousin. Witnesses. Evidence that your marriage is a fraud perpetrated to secure your title through deception. Severin accepted the offered brandy with a mocking salute. But I am not unreasonable. I merely wish to protect our family's honor. By blackmail? By compromise. Acknowledge me as your heir presumptive in legal documents. Make it known that should your marriage prove unfruitful, the title passes to me rather than any questionable offspring. Alaric's expression remained granite, betraying nothing of his inner turmoil. And should I refuse this generous offer, then by week's end every salon in London will know that the Duke of Hawthorne has married a woman of unknown, perhaps even common birth. The scandal would be devastating. Severin placed his untouched brandy on the desk. Consider carefully, cousin. Family name against family honor. You have until tomorrow evening to decide. After Severin's departure, Alaric remained motionless, staring at the ancestral portraits that had witnessed 7 generations of Hawthorne duty and sacrifice. His mind raced with calculations and contingencies, assessing threats and countermeasures with cold precision. He was so absorbed in thought that he failed to notice Evelyn's entrance until she spoke. "Forgive my intrusion," she said softly, startling him from his reverie. "I wished to inquire if all was well." He turned to find her standing in the doorway, uncertainty evident in her posture. The morning light illuminated her golden hair, creating an effect not unlike a halo in the religious paintings that adorned the family chapel. "All is as it ever was with Severin," he replied tersely. "Threats veiled as concern, ambition masked as principle." She hesitated, then stepped further into the room. "May I ask what he wanted?" Alaric considered deflecting her question, but found himself answering with unexpected honesty. "He has made inquiries about your background. He threatens scandal." Evelyn's face paled, but she did not appear shocked. "I see." Her hands clasped before her, steadying their tremor through sheer force of will. "And what do you intend to do?" The question hung between them, simple yet laden with implication. In that moment, studying her composed features and the dignity with which she bore his scrutiny, Alaric made a decision that had less to do with strategy than with an unfamiliar sense of protectiveness. "I intend to take my wife to Hawthorne Hall, away from London's prying eyes and venomous tongues." He moved toward her, stopping at a proper distance yet closer than they normally stood. "Whatever Severin believes he knows, he cannot touch us at Hawthorne." Relief softened her features, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "And if he pursues his threats regardless, then he will discover that while the Hawthorne name stands for duty, it also stands for loyalty." His voice lowered, gaining an intensity that transformed his typically cold demeanor. "I made vows before God and Crown, Evelyn. I do not break my word, regardless of circumstance." Something unspoken passed between them, not affection perhaps, but a nascent alliance against a common threat. For the briefest moment, Alaric glimpsed vulnerability in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of secrets, yet unshared. The grandfather clock chimed, breaking the moment. Evelyn stepped back, resuming her customary poise. "I shall instruct the staff to prepare for our departure." "Yes, we leave at first light tomorrow." He hesitated, then added, "It would be wise to bring Lady Clara into our confidence. Her friendship may prove valuable in the days ahead." "As you wish, Alaric." As she turned to leave, he called after her, "Evelyn." She paused, glancing back with questioning eyes. "Whatever truths or falsehoods exist in your past, you are now a Hawthorne. Remember that." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I shall endeavor to be worthy of the name, Your Grace." After she had gone, Alaric moved to the window, watching as the spring rain began to fall, washing away the London soot from the cobblestones below. Like the rain, they would retreat to Hawthorne Hall to cleanse themselves of the city's contaminating influence. But unlike the rain, they carried their troubles with them. For Severin would not be so easily deterred, and the secrets Evelyn harbored remained a vulnerability that threatened all Alaric had built his life upon. Yet as he contemplated the coming storm, he found his thoughts less occupied with the potential damage to his title, and more concerned with the woman who had entered his life as a convenience, and was becoming, most inconveniently, someone he felt compelled to shield. The rain fell harder, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Tomorrow they would flee to Hawthorne Hall, but whether they fled towards safety or into a more elaborate trap remained to be seen. All Alaric knew with certainty was that the trembling hands of his Duchess now held more than teacups and embroidery hoops. They held his name, his legacy, and perhaps something even more precious that he dared not yet examine too closely. The journey to Hawthorne Hall had been undertaken in relative silence, with Alaric absorbed in correspondence and Evelyn gazing out at the passing countryside. As their carriage crested the final hill, the ancestral seat of the Hawthorne family came into view. A magnificent Jacobean manor house of golden stone, its many paned windows gleaming in the afternoon sunlight, surrounded by formal gardens that gave way to rolling parkland. "Hawthorne Hall," Alaric announced unnecessarily, watching Evelyn's face as she beheld her new home for the first time. "It's beautiful," she breathed, her blue eyes widening with genuine admiration. "Like something from a fairy tale." A faint smile touched Alaric's lips. "Hardly that. It is old and draughty, with plumbing that protests vociferously every winter, but it has stood for 400 years and will stand for 400 more, God willing." The carriage rolled to a stop before the grand entrance, where a line of servants had assembled to greet their master and new mistress. As Alaric handed Evelyn down, he noted the barely perceptible squaring of her shoulders, a marshalling of courage that stirred an unexpected admiration within him. "Mrs. Winters, my housekeeper," he murmured, as they approached the austere woman at the head of the line. "Her approval is more valuable than that of the Queen herself." Mrs. Winters curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, welcome home, and Her Grace the Duchess, we are honored by your presence." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters," Evelyn replied, her voice clear and warm. "I look forward to learning the ways of Hawthorne Hall under your guidance." The housekeeper's stern features softened almost imperceptibly, and Alaric noted the small victory with approval. Perhaps his wife possessed hidden diplomatic talents that might yet prove useful. The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of activity, tours of the principal rooms, unpacking of trunks, and the inevitable mountain of correspondence that had accumulated during the Duke's absence. By evening, they dined in the smaller family dining room rather than the grand formal hall, a concession to practicality that Evelyn seemed to appreciate. "You've been quiet," Alaric observed, as they sat before the fire in the library after dinner, he with his brandy, she with her embroidery. "I am overwhelmed," she admitted, her needle pausing in its delicate work. "Not unpleasantly so, but Hawthorne Hall is magnificent in its scale and history. I feel its weight upon me." "It is a responsibility," he agreed, studying the amber depths of his drink. "One that has shaped every Hawthorne for generations. And now it shapes me as well." Her needle resumed its rhythmic movement. "I noticed the gallery of Hawthorne duchesses. So many remarkable women. Yes, each chosen carefully for what she would bring to the line." He hesitated, then added, "Each remembered for how she upheld the family honor." Evelyn's hands stilled once more. "Is that why we left London so precipitously? To protect the family honor from Lord Severin's threats?" The directness of her question surprised him. "Partly, and partly to give you respite from society's scrutiny while you adapt to your new position." "That was considerate. Thank you." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Hargrove, bearing a silver salver with a letter. "Delivered by special messenger, Your Grace." Alaric broke the seal, a stylized V pressed into dark red wax. His expression hardened as he scanned the contents. "Severin?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes, he expresses concern for our hasty departure and wishes us a pleasant sojourn in the country." Alaric's voice was tight with controlled anger. "He also mentions his intention to call upon Lady Pembroke tomorrow to discuss certain historical curiosities regarding lineages. He means to proceed with his threats then." "So it would appear." Alaric folded the letter precisely and consigned it to the fire. "He has always been methodical in his malice." Evelyn set aside her embroidery, her hands clasping together to still their trembling. Perhaps I should tell you the truth of my circumstances, Your Grace, before Lord Severin's version reaches your ears through other channels." The moment hung between them, fraught with unspoken truths. Alaric studied his wife's face, noting the fear in her eyes, but also the resolution in the set of her jaw. "Yes," he said finally, "I believe that would be wise." Evelyn drew a deep breath. "My name is indeed Evelyn Graceworth, but the Graceworth line is not as it was represented to you. My father was a scholar, a professor of antiquities at Oxford. We lived modestly but respectably until his death 5 years ago. He left significant debts that I struggled to repay while maintaining appearances. And the connections to nobility that Whitcomb verified? Fabricated, with the assistance of certain documents my father had access to through his work. Not by me," she hastened to add, "but by the solicitor who arranged our marriage. He approached me, not the reverse." Alaric's expression remained unreadable. "Go on." "He explained that a duke required a bride of appropriate background, but without entanglements or excessive family connections. I was promised that my embellished lineage would withstand cursory investigation. In return, I would secure a position that would relieve my financial burdens and provide stability." Her voice faltered. "I did not anticipate Lord Severin's thorough inquiries." "Few do," Alaric replied grimly. "He is relentless when he perceives advantage." "I understand if you wish to annul our marriage," Evelyn said quietly, her dignity and potential disgrace stirring something unexpected within Alaric's chest. "I would not contest it." He rose from his chair and moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit gardens his ancestors had cultivated for centuries. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. "Do you know why I agreed to this marriage, arranged so hastily and with such limited information about you?" "To secure your title and produce an heir, as duty demands," she replied without hesitation. "Yes, duty." He turned to face her, his features illuminated by the firelight. "The same duty that has guided every Hawthorne decision for 7 generations, and yet that duty now presents me with a conundrum. To preserve the family name, I should indeed cast you aside at the first hint of impropriety or deception. Evelyn's face paled, but she nodded, accepting the judgment. However, Alaric continued, that same duty prohibits me from breaking vows made before God, regardless of the circumstances that preceded them. His grey eyes held hers. You are my wife, Evelyn, the Duchess of Hawthorne. Whatever your father was or was not, changes nothing of that fact. Relief and disbelief warred in her expression. But surely once Lord Severin reveals, let him reveal what he wishes. A man who would threaten a woman's reputation to advance his own interests demonstrates precisely why he is unfit to bear the Hawthorne name. Alaric's voice had taken on a steel that transformed his usually cold demeanor into something approaching passion. We will face whatever comes, but we will face it as Hawthornes. Evelyn rose, her trembling hands clasped before her. I do not deserve such loyalty. It is not a question of deserving, but of duty. My duty to you as my wife. He hesitated, then added more softly, and perhaps of what is right. The grandfather clock chimed 10, breaking the tension of the moment. Alaric moved toward the door. It grows late, we should retire. As they ascended the grand staircase together, a first in their marriage, Evelyn spoke softly. Thank you, Alaric, for your understanding. He paused at the top of the stairs. Understanding suggests acceptance without reservation. I have not yet reached that point, Evelyn, but I have made my decision. We proceed as husband and wife before the world, united against whatever Severin may attempt. Yes, your grace. Her voice had regained its composure, though her hand still betrayed her emotion. They parted at the door to her chambers, Alaric bowing formally. Yet as he turned to go, he found himself speaking once more. One question, if I may. Was anything you told me about yourself true, beyond your name? Evelyn met his gaze steadily. Everything else, my mother's early death, my love of music and poetry, my hope for a peaceful life filled with small dignities, those were not fabrications. Alaric nodded once, accepting her words. Good night, Duchess. Good night, Duke. In the privacy of his chambers, Alaric removed his gloves with methodical precision, his mind racing with contingencies and countermeasures against Severin's machinations. Yet beneath these strategic calculations ran an undercurrent of something less familiar, a grudging respect for the quiet courage Evelyn had displayed in confessing her deception, and a protective instinct that seemed to transcend his mere duty to the Hawthorne name. As he placed his signet ring upon the bedside table, he noticed for the first time a slight tremor in his own steady hands. 3 weeks passed at Hawthorne Hall in a rhythm of cautious accommodation. Each morning, Alaric and Evelyn broke their fast together in the morning room, discussing estate matters with increasing ease. Each afternoon, she explored the vast house and gardens, while he attended to business in the estate office. Each evening they dined together and retired to the library, where a tentative companionship began to form over books and music. It was during one such evening, as Evelyn played a melancholic Chopin nocturne on the grand piano, that Hargrove appeared at the library door with an uncharacteristic expression of discomfort. Your Grace, he announced, his voice tight with disapproval, Lady Clara Lismere has arrived. She apologizes for the late hour and lack of notice, but insists the matter is urgent. Alaric set aside his book immediately. Show her in, Hargrove. Clara swept into the library like an autumn storm, her travelling clothes dusty from the road, her auburn curls escaping their pins. Alaric, Evelyn, thank heavens you're both here. She clasped Evelyn's hands warmly before turning to Alaric. I came as quickly as I could. What has happened? Alaric asked, signaling Hargrove to bring tea. Severin has been busy, Clara replied, removing her gloves with quick, agitated movements. He's been circulating certain insinuations about Evelyn's background in every drawing room from Mayfair to Belgravia. Evelyn's fingers stilled on the piano keys, a discordant note hanging in the air. I see. Not content with mere whispers, he's somehow obtained documents, or forgeries thereof, suggesting impropriety in your marriage. Clara's green eyes flashed with indignation. The wretch even approached my father, thinking to recruit him to his cause. And did he succeed? Alaric inquired, his voice betraying nothing of his inner tension. Clara's laugh was sharp and bright. Papa told him that a Vale questioning a Hawthorne's honor was like a jackal questioning a lion's courage, presumptuous and ultimately futile. Some of the rigidity left Alaric's shoulders. Lord Lismere's influence in society remained considerable despite his advanced age. But that's not all, Clara continued, accepting the tea Hargrove had brought. Severin has brought his sister Margaret into the affair. She's been calling upon every lady of consequence, playing the concerned relative distressed by her cousin's unfortunate match. How theatrical of her, Alaric commented dryly. The Vale family talent for melodrama remains undiminished. Evelyn had risen from the piano bench, her face composed, despite the slight tremor in her hands. "What is being said specifically, Lady Clara?" "Clara, please," the auburn-haired woman corrected gently. "And various things. That you are the daughter of a disgraced scholar who falsified research, that your connections to nobility were fabricated, that the marriage was arranged through deception." She hesitated, then added more softly, "And more recently, that you married Alaric to escape creditors pursuing your father's debts." Alaric's expression darkened. "That goes beyond insinuation into slander." "Yes, which is why I came immediately. Severin is escalating his campaign more rapidly than I anticipated." Clara's gaze moved between them. "He seems determined to force a public response." "And what is society's reaction to these revelations?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady despite the storm Alaric could see brewing behind her eyes. "Mixed," Clara admitted. "Some relish the scandal, of course. They always do. Others find Severin's methods distasteful, regardless of the truth of his claims." She reached for Evelyn's hand. "And some, like myself, stand firmly with the Duchess of Hawthorne, whatever her origins may be." Silence fell as Alaric moved to the fireplace, his back to the room as he contemplated their position. Finally he turned, decision evident in his posture. "Clara, I must ask, did you come alone?" "Not entirely." A smile curved her lips. "My father follows tomorrow with his solicitor. He suggested a united front might be appropriate." Wise counsel, as always, from Lord Lismere. Alaric's gaze shifted to Evelyn. "We must return to London." "To face the accusations directly?" she asked, a touch of apprehension in her voice. "Yes, retreat only feeds speculation. We shall return and present ourselves at Lady Ashworth's ball 3 nights hence. The entire society will be there." His grey eyes held a steely determination. "We shall demonstrate that the Duke and Duchess of Hawthorne stand united, unbowed by malicious gossip." "It will not be easy," Clara cautioned. "Margaret Vale has been particularly effective among the younger ladies, playing upon their romantic notions of bloodlines and suitable matches. Then we must be equally effective in reminding them that true nobility lies in character rather than circumstance." Alaric's voice had taken on a quality Evelyn had not heard before, a passionate conviction that transformed his typically austere demeanor. Later that evening, after Clara had been settled in the blue guest chamber, Alaric found Evelyn in the gallery of ancestral portraits. She stood before the painting of his mother, the previous Duchess, a formidable woman whose serene expression belied her legendary strength of will. "She would have admired your composure this evening," he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. Evelyn started slightly at his approach. "I doubt that very much. She would likely be appalled to find her son married to a professor's daughter with counterfeit credentials." "You underestimate her and yourself." Alaric studied the portrait thoughtfully. "She valued authenticity above all else. She would have respected your honesty in confessing the truth to me before Severin could weaponize it. Even so, I've brought scandal upon your name." Evelyn's hands twisted together in that now familiar gesture of distress. "Perhaps we should consider a quiet annulment after all. It might yet preserve your reputation." "No." The word emerged more forcefully than he'd intended. More measured, he continued. "That path leads only to greater scandal, and would grant Severin exactly what he desires, a path to the title." "Is that the only reason you refuse?" she asked, her blue eyes searching his face in the dim gallery light. The question caught him unprepared, forcing him to examine motivations he had not fully acknowledged even to himself. "No," he admitted finally, "not the only reason." "What then?" Alaric hesitated, unaccustomed to articulating such personal reflections. In these weeks at Hawthorne I have observed you closely, Evelyn. Your dignity in difficulty, your kindness to the servants, your genuine appreciation for this house and its history. His voice softened. You may not have been born to this position, but you embody its finest qualities nonetheless. Color rose in her cheeks at his unexpected praise. I have merely tried to honor the opportunity given to me, however it came about. And that, he said with quiet certainty, is precisely what makes you worthy of the Hawthorne name. He offered his arm. Come, we should retire. Tomorrow brings preparations for our return to London and the battle that awaits us there. As they walked together down the long gallery, surrounded by the silent witnesses of generations past, Evelyn spoke softly. I am afraid, Alaric, not for myself, but for what this might cost you. Fear is natural, he replied, even proper when facing a worthy adversary, but it must never govern our actions. He glanced down at her, noting the resolve firming beneath her apprehension. We shall face society together as husband and wife. Let Severin do his worst. At her chamber door, he bowed formally, as was their custom. Yet as he straightened, impulse overcame habit, and he took her trembling hand in his gloved one, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture that surprised them both. Sleep well, Evelyn. Tomorrow we prepare for battle. Her eyes widened at the unexpected gallantry, but she recovered quickly, curtsying with perfect grace. Good night, my husband. The familial form of address spoken for the first time lingered in the air between them, transforming the empty formality of their arrangement into something less defined, but potentially more significant. As Alaric strode to his own chambers, he found himself contemplating the peculiar alchemy of their situation, how a marriage founded on duty and convenience was gradually transmuting into an alliance of mutual respect and shared purpose. Whether it might eventually transform into something more remained to be seen, but for now the battle against Severin's machinations would test the strength of the bond they had begun to forge. And as he removed his gloves that night, Alaric noted that his own hands remained steady, not with the cold control that had defined him for so long, but with a newer, warmer certainty that had begun to take root in his heart. Lady Ashworth's annual spring ball had always been the crowning event of the London season, its invitations coveted and its guest list scrutinized with the precision of military intelligence. The grand ballroom glittered with candlelight, reflecting off the jewels and polished buttons of the Ton's finest, as they engaged in the elaborate social choreography that defined their world. When the Major Domo announced, His Grace the Duke of Hawthorne and Her Grace the Duchess, a ripple of anticipation passed through the assembled nobility. Conversations paused mid-sentence, fans fluttered more rapidly, and every eye turned toward the grand staircase. Alaric descended first, resplendent in formal evening attire, his bearing regal and his expression inscrutable. At his side walked Evelyn, a vision in sapphire silk that matched her eyes, her golden hair adorned with a simple diamond tiara from the Hawthorne collection. Her chin was lifted, her posture perfect, and if her hands trembled slightly where they rested on Alaric's arm, only he was positioned to notice. "Magnificent entrance," murmured Clara, who awaited them at the foot of the stairs with her father, Lord Lismere. "Every matron in the room is positively quivering with curiosity." "Then let us not disappoint them," Alaric replied, his voice carrying just far enough for those nearest to hear. "My wife and I are delighted to rejoin society after our sojourn at Hawthorne Hall." Lady Ashworth approached, her expression a careful mask of cordial welcome. "Your Grace, Duchess, how lovely to see you both. We had begun to fear you had abandoned London entirely for rural pleasures." "Never permanently, Lady Ashworth," Evelyn replied with perfect composure. "Hawthorne Hall is magnificent, but London society offers stimulations that cannot be found elsewhere." "Indeed," their hostess responded, her eyes sharp with assessment. "There has been no shortage of stimulating conversation during your absence." "So we have heard," Alaric said smoothly. "Idle tongues rarely find more productive employment." As they moved into the ballroom, the crowd parted before them, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Alaric noted with grim satisfaction the strategic positioning of Severin and Margaret Vale near the refreshment table, their matched expressions of calculated surprise at the Hawthorns' appearance, speaking volumes about their coordinated campaign. "Shall we circulate?" Evelyn suggested, her voice steady despite the tension Alaric could feel in her arm. "First, a dance," he decided, guiding her toward the center of the ballroom as the orchestra began a waltz. "Let them see that the Duke of Hawthorn dances only with his Duchess tonight." As he led her into the waltz, Alaric was conscious of every eye upon them, assessing their harmony, searching for signs of strain or discord. Evelyn moved with natural grace, following his lead as if they had danced together 100 times rather than once. "You dance beautifully," he murmured, genuine admiration coloring his voice. "Their skill my father insisted upon," she replied, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. He believed even scholars' daughters should move with elegance. A wise man, then, despite his financial improprieties. The subtle acknowledgement of her true background, spoken without censure, brought a flash of surprise to her eyes. Yes, he was brilliant and kind, if not always practical. "I should like to have known him," Alaric said, surprising himself with the sincerity of the statement. As the waltz concluded, they were approached by the elderly Dowager Countess of Pembroke, a formidable figure, whose approval could make or break reputations with a single nod or sniff. "Hawthorn," she greeted Alaric with a tap of her lorgnette. "About time you emerged from hibernation, and this is your bride? Let me look at you properly, girl." Evelyn curtsied with perfect deference. "My lady, it is an honor." The Dowager circled Evelyn like a general inspecting a new recruit, her lorgnette rising to examine everything from the set of her shoulders to the arrangement of her hair. Finally, she harumphed. "Well, she has good posture and a respectful manner, which is more than I can say for half the so-called ladies of quality being paraded about these days." She fixed Alaric with a beady stare. "I've heard rumors, Hawthorn." "London thrives on them, Dowager Countess," he replied evenly. "Humph. That Vale boy has been particularly busy. Came to see me himself, full of concerns about the purity of noble bloodlines and other such nonsense." She snorted derisively. "As if the Vales hadn't married a tavern-keeper's daughter just 3 generations back to restore their depleted coffers." Alaric's eyebrows rose slightly at this unexpected revelation. "Indeed, how fascinating. Ancient history now, but I remember what others conveniently forget." The Dowager turned her attention back to Evelyn. "So, Duchess, I understand you're a scholar's daughter? Good. We need more intelligence and fewer vapors in the peerage. Come visit me for tea tomorrow. 3 o'clock precisely." With that imperial command issued, she swept away, leaving Evelyn momentarily speechless. Did she just publicly acknowledge your background while simultaneously extending her patronage? Yes. Alaric's lips curved in a rare smile. The Dowager Countess has always enjoyed confounding expectations, particularly when it discomfits those she finds tedious. Like Lord Severin? Precisely like Severin, whom she has evidently deemed more offensive than a duchess of questionable lineage. He offered his arm once more. "Shall we greet our host, Lord Ashworth? He has been watching our exchange with the Dowager with particular interest." As they moved through the ballroom, Alaric noted a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The Dowager's public acknowledgement had not erased the scandal, but it had complicated the narrative Severin had so carefully constructed. Whispers continued, but now they carried notes of confusion and reassessment rather than pure condemnation. It was near the refreshment table that the inevitable confrontation occurred. Severin, elegant in black evening attire, stepped directly into their path, his sister Margaret at his side. "Cousin," he greeted Alaric, his voice pitched to carry to nearby listeners. "How courageous of you to appear tonight, and with your wife." The pause before the word was deliberate and insulting. "Severin," Alaric acknowledged coolly. "I see you continue to grace events to which you contribute so little." Severin's smile remained fixed, though his amber eyes hardened. "I contribute truth where I find deception, cousin, a service to society." "How noble!" Evelyn spoke suddenly, her voice clear and steady. "Though true nobility lies in lifting others up, not in tearing them down for personal gain." Margaret Vale's eyes narrowed at this unexpected resistance. Bold words from a woman who gained her position through false pretenses. I gained my position through marriage, Miss Vale, Evelyn replied with quiet dignity. The same path every duchess before me has walked, whatever their birth. A marriage founded on lies, Severin interjected smoothly. Hardly a secure foundation. I find it curious, Alaric said, his voice dropping to a dangerous timbre, that you speak of foundation, Severin, when the Dowager Countess was just reminiscing about your own family's unconventional ancestry. Colour touched Severin's cheeks. Ancient history, distorted by an old woman's failing memory. Perhaps, but it raises an interesting question about your sudden concern for bloodlines. Alaric's grey eyes were cold as steel. One might almost suspect your crusade against my wife has less to do with preserving nobility's purity and more to do with your thwarted ambition. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the palpable tension between the cousins. Lord Lismere appeared at Alaric's side, his advanced age doing nothing to diminish his commanding presence. Hawthorne, he greeted Alaric with deliberate warmth. I was just telling Lady Ashworth how refreshing it is to see true dignity in the younger generation. His penetrating gaze shifted to Severin, particularly when contrasted with those who mistake ambition for purpose. Severin's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. Lord Lismere, your loyalty to your daughter's childhood friend is touching, though perhaps it blinds you to certain realities. I find my vision quite clear, Lord Vale. Clear enough to recognize a man willing to destroy a woman's reputation to advance his own interests. Lord Lismere's tone was mild, but his words cut like a blade. I wonder what that reveals about your fitness for any position of honor. Margaret Vale shifted uncomfortably, her golden brown eyes darting between her brother and the growing circle of onlookers. Something in her expression suggested doubt, a hairline crack in her previously unshakable alliance with Severin. Sensing advantage, Alaric pressed forward. My wife's father was a scholar of antiquities, Severin, a man of learning and integrity, if not great fortune. What precisely about that heritage do you find so objectionable? Her intelligence? Her appreciation for history? Or perhaps it is simply that she possesses qualities you recognize as superior to your own? The assembled nobility murmured at this direct challenge. Severin's smile had vanished entirely, replaced by barely suppressed fury. What I find objectionable, cousin, is deception presented as truth. Society functions on trust and transparency. Does it? Evelyn's voice was soft but carried clearly in the hushed circle. I had rather thought it functioned on compassion and mutual respect. At least that is what I've observed among true nobility. Lady Clara stepped forward then, linking her arm with Evelyn's in a gesture of unmistakable solidarity. Well said, Duchess. And I believe the orchestra is beginning another waltz. Shall we all return to the pleasures of the evening? Unless, Lord Vale, you wish to continue demonstrating your concern for propriety by creating a scene at Lady Ashworth's ball. The subtle rebuke struck home. Severin, recognizing the shift in the gathered crowd's sympathies, executed a stiff bow. Another time, perhaps. The evening grows tedious. With a sharp glance at his sister, he turned to depart. Margaret hesitated, an unreadable expression crossing her features before she curtsied mechanically and followed her brother. As the circle dispersed and the orchestra swelled, Lord Lismere nodded approvingly. Well handled, all of you. The first skirmish goes to House Hawthorne, I believe. Skirmish, not battle, Alaric cautioned. Severin will regroup and attempt another approach. But he will find it more difficult now, Clara observed. The Dowager's endorsement combined with his graceless retreat has weakened his position considerably. Alaric turned to Evelyn, whose composure remained intact despite the confrontation. You conducted yourself admirably, he said quietly. Your words were perfectly chosen. I merely spoke the truth as I understand it, she replied, about nobility and its true nature. Something in her sincerity stirred him. On impulse, he raised her gloved hand to his lips, not as the formal gesture of earlier days, but as a genuine acknowledgement of her courage. Then you understand it better than many born to it, he murmured, his grey eyes warming as they met hers. The evening continued, and though whispers still followed them, Alaric noted with satisfaction that many who had held back now approached to converse. drawn by curiosity and the endorsements of the Dowager Countess and Lord Lismere. By the time they departed, Evelyn had been invited to 3 tea gatherings and a charitable committee meeting, small victories in the campaign to secure her position. In their carriage returning to Hawthorne House, exhaustion finally claimed its due. Evelyn's shoulders slumped slightly, her practiced smile fading into weariness. "You may rest now," Alaric said gently. "You've earned it." "As have you," she replied, studying his face in the dim carriage light. "Thank you, Alaric, for standing by me so thoroughly. I did nothing more than honor my vows." Yet even as he spoke the words, he recognized their inadequacy. He had defended her not merely from obligation, but from a deeper impulse, one that had taken root during their weeks together at Hawthorne Hall and blossomed into something he had not anticipated when they first exchanged their hasty vows. As the carriage rolled through London's darkened streets, Alaric reached across the space between them and took Evelyn's hand in his gloved fingers closing around her bare ones in a silent promise that transcended duty and approached something far more profound. The following fortnight transformed London society into a battlefield of whispers and allegiances. Lady Ashworth's ball had marked merely the opening salvo in a campaign that now played out across drawing rooms and garden parties throughout the city. Yet the tide had begun to turn in subtle ways that even Severin Vale could not entirely counteract. The Dowager Countess's tea with Evelyn had proved pivotal. The formidable old woman had interrogated the new Duchess for 3 hours on subjects ranging from classical literature to household management, and had apparently found her answers satisfactory. When the Dowager subsequently invited Evelyn to pour tea at her exclusive literary salon, an honor typically reserved for women of unimpeachable standing, the message to society was unmistakable. "The old dragon has adopted you," Clara remarked with delight, as she sat with Evelyn in the morning room of Hawthorne House, sorting invitations that had begun to arrive with increasing frequency. "I haven't seen her take such an interest in anyone since she championed the Swedish ambassador's daughter 5 seasons ago." Evelyn smiled, her fingers tracing the embossed edge of an invitation. "She reminds me of my father, brilliant, demanding, and unexpectedly kind beneath her formidable exterior. A flattering comparison, I assure you." The new voice from the doorway brought both women to their feet. "Alaric," Evelyn greeted him, warmth coloring her voice. "I didn't realize you had returned from Parliament." The session concluded early. Lord Pembroke's gout proved more compelling than fiscal policy. Alaric's customary austerity had softened subtly in recent weeks, particularly in his interactions with his wife. "Clara, I trust you're not monopolizing the Duchess's entire morning." "Merely helping her navigate her suddenly overflowing social calendar," Clara replied with a knowing smile. "Your wife has become quite the sought-after companion since the Dowager's endorsement." "Indeed?" Alaric raised an eyebrow, crossing to examine the pile of invitations. "Lady Hewitt's garden party, Countess Rothwell's musical. Even Lady Pembroke appears to have reconsidered her initial assessment." "Society follows the Dowager's lead," Clara observed, "particularly when doing so provides such delicious drama. Scholar's daughter rises to Duchess through merit rather than birth, makes for a far more appealing narrative than Severin's sordid insinuations. And, more importantly, it allows everyone to feel magnanimous in their acceptance," Evelyn added with clear-eyed perception. "Nobility appreciating true quality despite unconventional packaging." Alaric studied his wife, struck once again by her intelligence and insight. "You understand them better than they understand themselves." "Not entirely," Evelyn demurred. "I merely recognize the story they wish to tell about themselves. My father taught me that people will believe what flatters their self-conception." Clara laughed, gathering her shawl. "And on that profound note, I shall take my leave. Papa expects me for luncheon with the Russian envoy. A tedious affair, but politically expedient." She kissed Evelyn's cheek. "Remember, the blue silk for tonight's opera. It brings out your eyes." After Clara's departure, a comfortable silence settled between husband and wife, a far cry from the strained formality of their early weeks together. "You've handled this situation with remarkable grace," Alaric said finally, taking a seat across from Evelyn. Many women would have crumbled under such scrutiny. I've had excellent guidance. Her fingers smoothed the embroidered tablecloth, a nervous habit, but her hands trembled less frequently now. And perhaps necessity has forged strength I did not know I possessed. The strength was always there, he countered. Circumstances merely revealed it. Their conversation was interrupted by Hargrove's discreet knock. Your Grace, Miss Margaret Vale requests an audience with the Duchess. Surprise registered on both their faces. Margaret? Alone? Alaric's expression darkened with suspicion. This is undoubtedly Severin's latest stratagem. Evelyn hesitated, then squared her shoulders. I shall receive her. Evelyn, I advise caution. The Vales are not to be trusted. I understand. Her blue eyes met his with quiet determination, but something in her manner at Lady Ashworth's ball suggested doubt. Perhaps there is an opportunity here we should not dismiss. After a moment's consideration, Alaric nodded. Very well, but I shall remain within earshot in the adjoining room. Margaret Vale entered the morning room with her customary elegance, though Evelyn noted immediately the absence of her usual hauteur. Her chestnut hair was arranged in a simpler style than her typical elaborate coiffure, and her amber eyes held an unfamiliar hesitancy. Miss Vale, Evelyn greeted her, maintaining proper formality. This is an unexpected pleasure. Duchess, Margaret curtsied, then hesitated, her practiced poise faltering. I believe I owe you an apology. Of all possible openings, this was perhaps the least anticipated. Evelyn gestured to a chair. Please sit. Would you care for tea? No, thank you. Margaret perched on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I shall speak plainly, Duchess. I have participated in my brother's campaign against you, believing his assertions about your background and his right to the Hawthorne title. I now find myself uncertain of both. What has prompted this reconsideration? Evelyn asked carefully, searching the younger woman's face for signs of deception. Several things. Margaret's gaze dropped to her clasped hands. The Dowager Countess's pointed remarks about our own family's past, Lord Lismere's evident disdain for Severin's methods, and, she hesitated, your dignity throughout. It has been illuminating. In what way? You have faced society's cruelest scrutiny without resorting to the tactics my brother employs. Innuendo, manipulation, leveraging others' weaknesses. Margaret's voice strengthened with unexpected passion. I was raised to believe that nobility was a matter of birth, not character. Recent events have forced me to question that assumption. Evelyn studied the young woman carefully, assessing the sincerity in her troubled expression. Your brother would be displeased to hear such thoughts. Severin, Margaret's voice faltered. My brother's ambition has always guided our family's actions. I have followed his lead without question, believing our shared blood demanded loyalty above all else. And now I find myself questioning whether blood loyalty should supersede moral judgment. She met Evelyn's gaze directly. When I observed you at Lady Ashworth's ball, your composure, your unwillingness to strike back with equal venom, I saw something my brother lacks. And what might that be? Grace, Margaret said simply. True nobility. In the silence that followed, Evelyn made a decision. Rising, she crossed to the bell pull. I believe this conversation calls for tea, after all. When Hargrove appeared, she requested a full service, then turned back to her unexpected visitor. Miss Vale, Margaret, if I may, your candor is appreciated, but I must ask, what precisely brings you here today? Beyond offering an apology? Margaret straightened, seeming to find resolution in Evelyn's directness. Information, Duchess. My brother plans a final decisive move against you. He has located your father's former assistant, a Mr. Finch, who claims to possess evidence of academic fraud, falsified research that led to your father's financial ruin. Evelyn's calm exterior betrayed nothing of the cold shock that ran through her. I see, and this evidence? Letters, apparently, that implicate your father in deliberate deception. Severin plans to present them at Lord Ashworth's dinner 2 nights hence, where both the Duke and several influential members of Parliament will be present. The tea arrived, and Evelyn busied herself with the familiar ritual, her hands steady despite the gravity of this revelation. As she handed Margaret a cup, she asked quietly, Why are you telling me this? Margaret accepted the cup, her expression troubled. Because I've begun to recognize the destructive nature of Severin's obsession. His hatred of the Duke has consumed him, warped his judgment. He speaks now of justice and propriety, but his eyes— She shuddered slightly. There is something in them that frightens me. And what do you hope to achieve by this warning? Evelyn pressed gently. I don't know, Margaret admitted, setting down her barely touched tea. Perhaps a chance to reclaim my own moral compass. Perhaps— She hesitated. Perhaps a hope that this endless cycle of retribution might somehow be broken. Before Evelyn could respond, the morning room door opened and Alaric entered, his expression grave but not hostile. Miss Vale, he acknowledged with a formal bow. I trust you will forgive my intrusion, but I could not help overhearing the latter portion of your conversation. Margaret paled but held her ground. Your Grace, I understand your skepticism regarding my motives. On the contrary, Alaric replied, surprising both women with his measured tone. I find your warning both timely and courageous. It cannot have been easy to break ranks with your brother. It was not, Margaret admitted. But I find I can no longer support actions I know to be wrong, regardless of family loyalty. Alaric studied her for a moment, then made a decision. Miss Vale, would you consider remaining at Hawthorne House as our guest for a day or two? For your own safety, if nothing else. Severin will not take kindly to your defection. Surprise flickered across Margaret's features, followed by visible relief. You would extend such courtesy after all that has transpired? It was Evelyn who answered, rising to stand beside her husband. The Hawthorne name stands for loyalty and duty, Miss Vale, not only to family and tradition, but to what is right. She extended her hand. We would be honored by your presence. As Margaret accepted this unexpected olive branch, the three stood together in a tableau that would have been unimaginable mere weeks before, the Duke and his unsuitable Duchess offering sanctuary to the sister of their greatest adversary. In that moment, lines of allegiance shifted and reformed, creating new possibilities for the confrontation that all knew lay ahead. For Severin's planned attack would not go unanswered, but the response would come not merely from the Duke of Hawthorne acting alone, but from an alliance forged through something stronger than blood, shared principles and mutual respect. And at the center of this transformation stood Evelyn, whose trembling hands had steadied as she poured tea for former enemy and beloved husband alike, a simple domestic ritual that somehow crystallized her unexpected journey from scholar's daughter to true duchess in every sense that mattered. Lord Ashworth's dining room glittered with silver and crystal, the long table accommodating 24 of London's most influential figures. Cabinet ministers conversed with ancient earls, while their elegantly attired wives exchanged pleasantries beneath the glow of the massive chandelier. At one end sat Lord Ashworth himself, corpulent and jovial, presiding over the gathering like a benevolent monarch. At the other, Lady Ashworth maintained her reputation for flawless hospitality with practiced grace. Alaric and Evelyn had been positioned near the center of the table, a placement that acknowledged both their rank and their current status as the most discussed couple in London. Opposite them sat Severin Vale, his amber eyes watchful and his conversation unnaturally animated. The empty chair beside him, intended for his sister, had raised eyebrows among the assembled guests, though Lady Ashworth had smoothly explained that Miss Vale had sent regrets due to a sudden indisposition. As the soup course was served, Evelyn felt Alaric's gloved hand briefly cover hers beneath the table, a gesture of reassurance before the storm they both knew approached. They had spent the past 2 days in careful preparation, working with Lord Lismere and his solicitor to counter Severin's planned attack. Margaret's unexpected defection had provided valuable intelligence, but the outcome remained uncertain. I understand congratulations may soon be in order, Hawthorne, remarked Sir William Blackwell, a prominent member of Parliament from several seats away. Lady Blackwell informs me that the Duchess has been making discreet inquiries regarding the Royal Foundling Hospital's patronage committee. Evelyn smiled, accepting the opening with composed grace. Indeed, Sir William, I believe those of fortunate circumstance have a particular obligation to assist children bereft of family support, A commendable sentiment, agreed Lady Rothwell, an influential patroness of numerous charities. The committee would benefit greatly from your involvement, Duchess. Severin's voice cut through the murmured approvals. How appropriate. The Duchess's concern for those of uncertain parentage speaks to her compassionate nature. The deliberate emphasis created a momentary lull in conversation. Alaric's jaw tightened, but Evelyn responded with unruffled composure. All children deserve advocacy, Lord Vale, regardless of their origins, a principle I believe transcends birth and circumstance. Her blue eyes met Severin's with quiet challenge. Would you not agree? Before he could respond, Lord Ashworth intervened with practiced diplomacy. I'm certain we all support the welfare of England's unfortunate children. Blackwell, what news of the trade negotiations with Prussia? The conversation shifted to safer political waters as footmen replaced the soup course with fish. Evelyn noted Severin's growing impatience as the meal progressed through multiple courses, without providing him the opening he clearly sought. By the time the roast was served, his fingers drummed restlessly against his wineglass, his practiced charm giving way to barely concealed agitation. It was during a momentary lull between the meat course and dessert that he finally made his move. I've been engaged in some fascinating historical research of late, Severin announced, his voice pitched to carry the length of the table, particularly regarding academic scandals at Oxford some years ago. The deliberate non sequitur drew curious glances. Lord Ashworth frowned slightly at this breach of conversational etiquette, but Severin pressed on. Most illuminating case involved a Professor Graceworth, an antiquities scholar who falsified research findings to secure funding. His gaze fixed on Evelyn. His disgrace was hushed up to preserve the university's reputation, but the evidence of his fraud remains quite compelling. A ripple of discomfort passed through the assembled guests as the targeted nature of his remarks became apparent. Alaric set down his glass with deliberate precision. Curious that your scholarly interests should suddenly extend to academic misconduct, Severin, a departure from your usual pursuits. Knowledge in all forms fascinates me, cousin. Severin reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. I have here letters from Professor Graceworth's assistant detailing the falsification of archaeological findings, forgeries intended to secure patronage from several noble families. He placed the envelope on the table with theatrical deliberation. Given recent connections between the Hawthorne name and the Graceworth legacy, I felt duty-bound to bring this information forward. Horrified silence descended upon the table. Lady Ashworth looked as though she might faint, while her husband's face had turned an alarming shade of purple at this blatant violation of dinner-party propriety. Before Alaric could respond, the dining-room doors opened to admit an unexpected trio, Lord Lismere, Clara, and Margaret Vale. Their entrance caused a fresh wave of murmurs, particularly at the sight of Severin's sister in the company of his adversaries. Lord Ashworth, Lord Lismere said with dignified authority, pray forgive our intrusion upon your excellent dinner. A matter of honour compels our presence. Lismere, Lord Ashworth recovered quickly, rising to greet his old friend. We had not expected you this evening. Circumstances demanded our attendance. Lord Lismere's piercing gaze moved to Severin. I understand Lord Vale has chosen your dining table as the venue for certain revelations. Severin's expression hardened as he took in his sister's presence among the new arrivals. Margaret, I'm surprised to find you in such company. Are you, brother? She replied, her voice steady despite her evident discomfort. You should not be. I informed you yesterday of my decision to distance myself from your vendetta. A temporary lapse in judgment, Severin dismissed, though his knuckles whitened around his wineglass. You will come to your senses. I believe I already have. Margaret moved to stand beside Evelyn's chair, a symbolic positioning that drew gasps from several guests. Lord Lismere stepped forward, commanding the room's attention through sheer force of presence. Lord Vale has presented letters purporting to demonstrate Professor Graceworth's academic dishonesty. I have here. He produced a document of his own, a signed confession from Mr. Finch, Professor Graceworth's former assistant, acknowledging that he himself falsified those letters at Lord Vale's instigation and substantial payment. Shock rippled through the gathering. Severin shot to his feet, his composure finally shattering. Absurd. The man is clearly lying. The confession is witnessed by 2 magistrates and includes banking records of your payments to Finch, Clara interjected calmly. The evidence is quite comprehensive, Lord Vale. Evelyn rose slowly, her dignity palpable in the hushed room. My father was many things. Brilliant, unworldly, perhaps too trusting, but he was never dishonest. His financial difficulties stemmed from his generosity to students and his disinterest in monetary matters, not from misconduct. A convenient claim, Severin sneered, though his confidence had visibly faltered. A truthful one, came a new voice from the doorway. The Dowager Countess of Pembroke entered, leaning heavily on her cane but radiating imperious authority. Professor Graceworth tutored my grandson in classical studies. His integrity was beyond question, unlike some present company. Lady Ashworth, desperate to salvage her disintegrating dinner party, rose with forced brightness. Perhaps we might adjourn to the drawing-room for dessert and— Not yet, Lady Ashworth, Alaric interrupted, standing to address the stunned gathering. Lord Vale has made serious allegations against my wife's family name, allegations now proven false. I believe the matter requires resolution before we proceed. He turned to face Severin directly, his grey eyes cold as winter frost. You have systematically attempted to destroy my wife's reputation through innuendo, fabricated evidence, and manipulation of society's prejudices. Your actions transcend mere ambition into malice, behavior unbecoming of the title you so covet. Severin's face had drained of color, but defiance still burned in his amber eyes. You speak of propriety while standing by a marriage that makes mockery of noble tradition. No, Severin. Alaric's voice had taken on a quality few had ever witnessed, passion breaking through his habitual reserve. It is you who mock nobility's true purpose. A title exists not as a prize to be grasped, but as a responsibility to be upheld. My wife, regardless of her origins, embodies the dignity, compassion, and moral courage that the Hawthorne name represents. With deliberate movements, Alaric removed his gloves, a gesture that drew every eye. For generations, Hawthorne men have worn gloves in public as a symbol of the distance between ourselves and those we serve. Today, I remove mine. He reached for Evelyn's hand, clasping it bare palm to bare palm before the assembled company, a shockingly intimate gesture in aristocratic society. I stand with my wife not from duty alone, but from profound respect and deepening affection. She has taught me that true nobility lies not in bloodlines but in character. Severin's face contorted with fury. Sentimental drivel. The peerage cannot survive such dilution. On the contrary, the Dowager Countess interjected acidly, it cannot survive without it. Fresh blood and fresh perspectives have always been the salvation of noble houses, wise enough to embrace them. Lord Ashworth, seizing the opportunity to reassert control, cleared his throat. Lord Vale, in light of these developments, I believe an apology to the Duke and Duchess would be appropriate. Severin looked around the table, reading the turning tide in the faces of those whose approval he had sought. Even those initially sympathetic to his cause now regarded him with distaste, his methods having transgressed the unwritten codes of aristocratic conduct. I will not apologize for defending principles you are too weak to uphold, he spat, throwing down his napkin. This farce of a marriage may find acceptance among the easily swayed, but history will vindicate my concerns. With that declaration, he strode from the dining room, his exit marked by uncomfortable silence. After a moment, Margaret stepped forward, her expression resolute despite her evident distress. I wish to apologize for my brother's behavior and my own earlier complicity. The Duke and Duchess have shown me true nobility through their actions, not merely their titles. This heartfelt declaration broke the tension. Lady Ashworth seized the moment with relief. Shall we proceed to the drawing-room? I believe we could all benefit from some refreshment after such unexpected developments. As the gathering rose and began to disperse, Alaric turned to Evelyn, still holding her hand in his bare one. It is over, he said quietly. Severin has played his final card and lost. Perhaps not his final card, she cautioned, ever practical, but his power to harm us has been greatly diminished. The Dowager Countess approached, thumping her cane for emphasis. Well handled, both of you. Though I must say, Hawthorne, removing your gloves at the dinner table, quite the dramatic gesture. Effective, though. Alaric's lips curved in a rare smile. I find myself increasingly drawn to meaningful gestures, rather than empty tradition, Dowager. Perhaps my wife's influence. Good. About time the Hawthorne men learned there's more to nobility than perfect posture and frozen dignity. She fixed Evelyn with her penetrating gaze. You'll pour tea at my literary salon again next week, Duchess. The Russian ambassador's wife has requested an introduction. As they moved toward the drawing room, Alaric kept Evelyn's hand in his, a public acknowledgement of their private transformation. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had evolved into a true partnership, forged in adversity, strengthened by mutual respect, and now blossoming into something neither had anticipated when they first exchanged their hasty vows. The battle with Severin had been won, at least for now, but the greater victory lay in what they had discovered together, that true nobility resided not in bloodlines or titles, but in the character one demonstrated when faced with life's challenges, and that the strongest hands were not those that never trembled, but those that found steadiness in supporting others. A year had passed since the fateful dinner at Lord Ashworth's, and the gardens of Hawthorne Hall bloomed with summer's full splendor. Roses climbed ancient stone walls, lavender scented the air, and bees hummed contentedly among the foxgloves. Beneath the shade of a venerable oak tree, Alaric sat watching as Evelyn read aloud to a circle of children gathered from the estate and neighbouring village, a monthly tradition she had established shortly after their return from London. Her golden hair caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves, and her blue eyes sparkled with animation as she gave different voices to characters in the story. The children listened in rapt attention, occasionally giggling at particularly dramatic flourishes. Among them sat Margaret Vale, who had taken up residence in the Dower House 6 months prior, after her final bitter break with Severin. Watching his wife, Alaric marvelled at the transformation in his own life. The austere, duty-bound man who had entered a marriage of convenience had been irrevocably changed by the trembling-handed woman who had brought warmth and purpose to Hawthorne Hall. Their partnership, forged in the crucible of scandal and strengthened through mutual respect, had blossomed into deep and abiding love. "The Duke appears lost in thought," observed Clara, approaching with a basket of freshly cut flowers. "A penny for your contemplations, old friend." Alaric smiled, a gesture that no longer felt foreign to his features. "I was reflecting on change, Clara. How profoundly one's life can be altered by unexpected circumstances, or unexpected duchesses," she replied with characteristic directness. "She has been good for you, Alaric, for Hawthorne Hall, for all of us." He nodded, watching as Evelyn closed her book to enthusiastic applause from her young audience. "She has taught me that duty without compassion is merely obligation, while duty informed by love becomes purpose." Clara followed his gaze, her expression softening. "And to think you nearly refused Whitcomb's arrangement out of concern for lineage purity." "A narrow escape from lifetime folly," he acknowledged wryly, "though I maintain Whitcomb knew precisely what he was about when he presented her as a candidate. The old fox recognized qualities I was too blind to value." The children dispersed, running across the lawn with boundless energy. Evelyn rose, brushing grass from her simple summer dress, a far cry from the formal silks and satins of London society, though she moved between both worlds with increasing confidence. Margaret joined her, the two women conversing with the easy familiarity that had developed between them. "Will you attend Parliament next session?" Clara inquired, arranging her flowers with practiced skill. "Yes, though with less regularity than before. I've found my presence at Hawthorne more valuable than my speeches in London." Alaric's voice held no regret for this shift in priorities. "The estate reforms Evelyn suggested have proven remarkably effective. Tenant productivity has increased 30% since we implemented the new education initiative." "Scholar's daughter," Clara murmured approvingly. "She brings perspective the peerage desperately needs." Their conversation paused as Hargrove approached, bearing a silver salver with a letter. "From London, Your Grace, marked urgent." Alaric broke the seal. Not the Vale crest, but one belonging to the Prime Minister. His expression remained impassive as he scanned the contents. "Significant news?" Clara inquired, noting his prolonged silence. "Severin has left England," he replied, folding the letter precisely. "Apparently he has accepted a diplomatic posting to the West Indies, a convenient exile arranged by those who found his tactics distasteful, but his connections too valuable to discard entirely." "A fitting conclusion," Clara observed. "Distance may grant him perspective, or merely new targets for his ambition." Alaric tucked the letter into his coat. "Either way, the immediate threat to Hawthorne is removed." Across the lawn, Evelyn had noticed his receipt of the letter. She excused herself from Margaret and approached, her expression questioning. "News from London?" Alaric rose, taking her hands in his, bare palm to bare palm, as had become their custom in private. "Severin has accepted a posting abroad. The Prime Minister believes his departure permanent." Relief flashed briefly across her features before concern replaced it. "And Margaret, how will she take this news?" "With more equanimity than you might expect," Margaret answered, joining them beneath the oak's spreading branches. "My brother and I exchanged our final words months ago. His departure merely formalizes the distance that already existed between us." The quiet dignity in her voice spoke volumes about her own journey over the past year, from Severin's accomplice to independent woman forging her own path, guided by newfound principles rather than blind loyalty. "You have created a true home here," she continued, gesturing to the idyllic scene around them, "a place where worth is measured by character rather than circumstance. I am grateful to have found welcome within it." Evelyn squeezed her hand warmly. "Hawthorne has always valued substance over appearance, has it not, Alaric?" "It does now," he replied, the simple acknowledgement encompassing the profound shift in his own worldview. As afternoon mellowed toward evening, guests began arriving for the summer festival Evelyn had revived from Hawthorne tradition, a gathering that brought together aristocracy and villagers, academics and farmers, united in celebration of the estate that sustained them all. The Dowager Countess arrived in her ancient carriage, complaining vigorously about the journey, while clearly relishing the occasion. Lord Lismere came with his latest protégé, a promising young politician who looked about with undisguised admiration. Even Lady Pembroke, once so dismissive of Evelyn's modest attire, now sought her approval for charitable endeavours. The great lawn transformed into a festival ground, with musicians playing country dances and tables laden with simple but abundant fare. Alaric moved through the gathering, noting how seamlessly Evelyn navigated between duchess and hostess, scholar and benefactress, roles she had integrated with remarkable grace. As dusk approached, lanterns were lit throughout the garden, casting a golden glow over the proceedings. Alaric found Evelyn near the rose garden, momentarily alone as she adjusted a lantern's position. "Are you pleased with your festival, Duchess?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Immensely," she replied, her smile warm in the lantern light, "though I believe it is the Duke's festival, traditionally speaking. Perhaps once. Now it is ours, like all else at Hawthorne." He offered his arm, which she took with familiar ease. "Walk with me. There is something I wish to show you." They strolled through the rose garden to a secluded corner where a new stone bench had been placed, overlooking both the festival below and the rolling countryside beyond. As Evelyn seated herself, Alaric withdrew a small package from his coat. "A gift," he said simply, placing it in her hands. Unwrapping the paper, she revealed a small, leather-bound volume, a first edition of her father's most significant work on classical antiquities. "Alaric," she breathed, her fingers tracing the embossed title reverently. "How did you find this?" His books were sold after his death to settle debts. With considerable effort and surprising assistance from the Dowager Countess, who apparently maintains correspondence with antiquarian booksellers throughout Europe, he sat beside her, watching emotion play across her expressive features. "Open it." Inside the cover, she found a handwritten note in her father's distinctive script, a personal inscription to a colleague expressing gratitude for their friendship and intellectual camaraderie. Tears welled in her eyes as she read his words, a tangible connection to the man she had lost. "Thank you," she whispered, closing the book carefully, "for this and for everything. I have something else for you as well," Alaric continued, his voice softening, "though it is less tangible than a book." From the festival grounds below came the cry of a newborn, a sound that brought a tender smile to Evelyn's lips. "Our tenant's new daughter," she observed, "born just yesterday, I'm told." "Yes, and in need of godparents, according to tradition." Alaric took her hands in his grey eyes warmer than she had ever seen them. "But I find myself thinking beyond godchildren, Evelyn." Her breath caught as understanding dawned. "Alaric, when we married I spoke of duty and lineage, cold concepts unworthy of what has grown between us." His voice deepened with emotion rarely displayed so openly. "I wish for a child not to secure succession, but to embody the love I bear you." Joy illuminated her face, transforming it in the golden lantern light. "Truly? Truly?" He raised her hand to his lips. "The Duke of Hawthorne finds himself humbled by happiness he never sought and never believed possible." As night fell completely, they remained on their secluded bench, speaking softly of dreams and possibilities, of a future rich with purpose and meaning. Below them the festival continued, music and laughter rising on the summer air, lanterns glowing like earthbound stars, the community united in celebration of abundance and connection. And if the Duke's arm encircled his Duchess with protective tenderness, and if her head came to rest upon his shoulder in a display that would have scandalized London drawing rooms, there were no witnesses save the ancient oak trees and eternal stars, silent guardians of transformations, worked by time and love and courage. Later, as they made their way back to join their guests, Evelyn paused to adjust a lantern that had tilted precariously. Alaric watched her hands, steady now, confident in their purpose, and reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a marriage of convenience, a transaction to secure a title and provide stability, had blossomed into something neither had anticipated. Through scandal and opposition, through revelations and reconciliations, they had discovered that true nobility lay not in bloodlines or titles, but in the capacity for growth, compassion, and love. The Duke of Hawthorne, once defined by rigid duty and cold control, had learned that strength could be found in vulnerability, and that hands that trembled with emotion might be wiser than those that never faltered at all. His Duchess, once intimidated by the weight of tradition and expectation, had discovered her own quiet power, the ability to transform a great house into a true home, and a marriage of convenience into a union of kindred spirits. As they rejoined their festival beneath the summer stars, their joined hands symbolized the most profound revelation of all, that grace was not bestowed by birth or rank, but cultivated through choices made in moments of trial, and that dignity came not from perfect composure, but from the courage to remain true to one's principles, even when the world trembled around you. In the great tapestry of Hawthorne history, their story would be woven with threads both traditional and unexpected, a pattern uniquely their own, yet strengthening the whole. And in generations to come, when young Hawthornes asked about the Duke with ungloved hands and the Duchess whose touch transformed a lineage, the tale would be told of how true nobility was revealed not through perfect pedigrees, but through the perfect union of duty and compassion, strength and tenderness, pride and grace. For in the end, it was not the trembling of hands that defined weakness or strength, but what those hands built together when they finally, bravely, reached for one another. In the quiet chambers of our hearts, we often build walls of propriety and expectation, forgetting that true nobility resides not in the steadiness of our hands, but in the courage of our convictions. Alaric and Evelyn's journey reminds us that our greatest strength often emerges from what we perceive as weakness, and that the trembling hands of vulnerability may accomplish more lasting works than the rigid grip of pride. Society may judge us by the circumstances of our birth or the titles we bear, but our true worth is measured by how we respond to life's challenges, with dignity in adversity, compassion in judgment, and grace under fire. The walls we build to protect ourselves can become the very prisons that prevent our growth, until we find the courage to remove our metaphorical gloves and touch the world with bare, honest hands. Like the Duke who learned that control without compassion is merely coldness, and the Duchess who discovered that humility need not mean invisibility, we are all capable of transformation when we allow genuine connection to challenge our most fundamental assumptions. Perhaps this is the truest nobility of all, the willingness to question our inherited beliefs and allow ourselves to be changed by those we once thought beneath us. In a world that often values appearance over substance and certainty over growth, may we all find the courage to remove our protective gloves, to allow our hands to tremble with authentic emotion, and to build something more beautiful than perfection, a life of meaning, connection, and enduring grace. If you've been moved by the Duke's trembling hands, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depths of human transformation and the quiet courage it takes to become our truest selves. Each week, we bring you tales of remarkable journeys, historical and contemporary, that illuminate the path to authentic nobility of spirit. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered strength in what you once perceived as weakness? Has someone unexpected taught you about true dignity or grace? Your stories and reflections create a community of fellow travelers on this most human of journeys. Until our next tale unfolds, remember that the most powerful changes often begin with hands that tremble, not with fear, but with the courage to reach beyond the boundaries of who we thought we were.